We're starting off the show in style. Dodd of CBS Sports joining us here on Up to the Second College Football. And there's a lot of marquee games I want to get into with him as the season does start. Week 1. Dennis, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Great to be here. I am ready for some ball. How are you?
I'm doing great. I want to start things off with the Ohio State Notre Dame game because, man, like I have a feeling that Ohio State is so much better than most of the teams in college football that I don't even see this as a matchup. But Notre Dame is one of those teams that people keep trying to knock off, yet they're still, in the top 5, and Marcus Freeman doing a really good job there. How do you see this game playing out?
Yeah, it's really hard for me to make a case for Notre Dame. Marquee matchup of the brands, as you mentioned. But what's the numbers? 14 and a half, maybe up to 17 now. I think that's about right. I think Notre Dame's a little bit overrated at 5. I mean, you're telling me that team with a quarterback who's really never played much is one step away from a playoff? I don't think so. And you're right about Ohio State. Even if they hadn't fixed the defense, and they did with Jim Knowles, one of the best defensive coordinators in the country, they could outscore their way to a playoff berth. And I think they're just absolutely loaded. They're maybe just a tick behind Alabama. This is what Ohio State looked like in 19 when they lost that championship game to Alabama. And maybe they should have won that year, but now they've got the defense fixed. They're absolutely loaded.
I feel like I can do a copy and paste here about these thoughts about the Oregon-Georgia game. Georgia, it's hard to tell how they're going to be because of so many new faces, yet they are the defending national champions. They do have Stetson Bennett coming back, who found his groove at the end of last season. Can you make a case for Oregon or no?
Not Saturday. In the first game Dan Lanning has ever coached, much like Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, but in the belly of the beast in Atlanta, in Georgia's ancestral home in Mercedes-Benz, that's going to be tough. With a Bo Nix sighting, I think Georgia knows enough about Bo Nix to take him on. So no, I mean, I think it's going to be. Look, if Alabama wasn't around, and that's a bold statement, we'd be talking about Georgia going for 2 in a row. I think they can get into the Final Four, but look what they've got coming back with Bennett, a guy who didn't take a snap in the 2021 spring, didn't take a snap. Now he owns the world. He'll never have to pay for a meal again in Athens. And by the way, he's a pretty damn good quarterback. I mean, he throws that down the silo with 10 minutes left against Alabama for the game-winning score. And the season he had, I think he was among the top 3 or 5 or passing rating, which people don't really pay attention to, but is a good measure. He's the man. And I think they've got a great tight end room, maybe the best in the country. The receivers, Kyrus Jackson and Brock Bowers, obviously lining up all over the field is great. They're going to run the ball. And the defense was generational last year. Let's just say they go down to a top 10 defense, which I think they'll be. That's still pretty good. Georgia's damn good.
Arkansas and Cincinnati. Cincinnati also losing guys, but they don't have SEC depth. So when you think about this matchup and where Arkansas's arrow is kind of pointing, how do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I'm really high on Arkansas this year. I just get the whole Sam Pittman thing. He's just such a good guy, and that doesn't win you football games necessarily, but the buy-in there is incredible. And they've got weapons with KJ Jefferson. They're going to be very physical offensively. Cincinnati coming off the best season they've ever had, and yeah, they missed the quarterback. They missed Sauce Gardner at cornerback. They're not going to be as good. I think they may be able to hang in under the number, but I like Arkansas to maybe finish as high as second in the West if everything goes right. A&M looks like that team right now, but if everything goes right and they win the key matchups, they could be as high as second or third. So not much of a game there either.
I didn't think I would be talking to you about the University of Houston and UTSA this early in an interview, but since we did talk Cincinnati, Houston could be this year's Cincinnati if you look at their schedule, but that's a tough matchup to start off.
It is, and as long as we're going to talk about Houston, we should talk about UTSA, because if they end up being that highest ranked group of 5 teams, they could get to a New Year's Six bowl. Houston, if they win them all, could be in consideration for the CFP, and I love what Dana Holgerson's been there. Nobody talks about him as one of the top football minds in the country, even though he comes from the Mike Leach tree. But they've got weapons. Clayton Tune at quarterback, Doug Belk, the defensive coordinator who came from Alabama. I love him. Nathaniel Dell is the best receiver, their leading receiver from last year, and I think they're going to be the Cincinnati of last year. Not necessarily get into the playoff, because I don't know if their schedule has enough quality teams on that for the committee to get them in, but certainly a New Year's Six candidate if they can win them all.
Dennis, let's talk about these new quarterbacks in the SEC. Who do you think is set up for the most success here this season?
Ooh, new quarterbacks in the SEC. Certainly not Florida. Kentucky's got Will Levis coming back. But that's one of the talking points of the entire league. The new guy's coming back. Missouri's got a guy. Eli Drinkwitz went after JT Daniels. He went after Spencer Rattler. He didn't sign them. It might be Spencer Rattler. He ended up at a place where it didn't seem like a good fit, just schematically, if nothing else, culturally. He's an Arizona guy. He's a West Coast guy. South Carolina didn't run his stuff. He's bought into a more pro-style offense. I was at one of his I was in Arizona when he was visiting home, and he spoke to a bunch of campers with his quarterback coach, like 8th and 9th graders, and he diagrammed a play from South Carolina that had 13 numbers in place to describe it, 13 numbers and words. That's what he called in the huddle to describe it. He said there were times at Oklahoma where he said one word, and like it meant all verts, but whatever it was. But in the air raid, it was one word. So that's different. He's bought into that. He's going to be under center. I like the upside of Shane Beamer, who really showed out his first year, doing what he did. And in this next year with a fire starter at quarterback, they're going to upset a couple of people. So maybe it's Spencer Rattler.
What about Haynes King? He's not necessarily a new face, but he is because of the injury so early on last year.
Yeah, he had those 5 quarters last year, before being hurt, a little bit even before that in 2020. I think this was the guy that I think a lot of people always thought was going to get the job. Number 7 dual threat out of high school, showed flashes last year. And really the season kind of revolved around him, getting injured. Zach Calzada, engineered the upset against Alabama, but didn't win the job at Auburn. So I think Haynes King is the guy that is going to keep them in the conversation for one of those top 4. Again, you see Texas A&M rated as high as 4 by some people. My question with Texas A&M is not Haynes King. I think he's going to be fine. They've got plenty of offensive weapons, but for A&M really to come through and this not be a gap year until a big 2023, 8 5-stars. How many of those are going to have to play? I asked Jimbo that, and he said, well, some of them will play. Some of them have to play or else they'll leave. They only want to be there 3 years. So I think that's a little bit too much to expect in year one from that recruiting class, as great as it is. Now, if you talk about this being a gap year and going backpacking in Europe and finding yourself before you go back to school and come back in 2023 and pursue a national championship, absolutely. I think it could be that. I think it could be second place in the West. I think it could be 9 wins at most, but not this year. But it will be fun to watch Haynes King.
All right, let's close it up with a similar question. Which head coach in his first year is set up for the most success?
In overall?
Yeah, just overall in college football. Yes, sir.
Oh, gosh, there's 31 of them. It might be Lincoln Riley. Now, that's saying a lot. They were 4-8 last year, USC. But there are people legitimately talking about USC not only winning the Pac-12. I will entertain that. But getting into the playoff, I will not entertain that. But there's something bigger at work here. He flipped that roster in a period of 6 weeks when he arrived in early December. 43 new guys. If they're all on scholarship, and they are, that's half the scholarships being flipped in a month and a half. I don't have to tell you the players they've got. But I think there's upside not only this year, but in years to come, restoring what USC was. I think, possibly denting that a little bit is the move to the Big Ten. It's going to be a while. It's going to be a couple of years, but one of the reasons you go to USC is you can get to the playoff from there. It's going to be a little harder in the Big Ten.
Dennis, we appreciate it, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's do this again, okay?
You bet. Thanks.